Welcome to this very special conversation with Stuart Roberts, the Asia Pac head of Cushman and Wakefield, who spent some time in Mumbai looking at our market. Stuart, welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Cafe.
It's lovely to have you in the country. India is obviously sort of gaining a lot of traction right now. Our Prime Minister has been traveling across the world. Tell us what the view is at this point with global investors as far as the Indian real estate market is concerned.
Well, interesting. You know that Prime Minister Modi was in Australia earlier this year, and had a rock star sort of performance.
Yes.
Crowds that were just enormous in stadium, which was fantastic. And I think it actually made people really aware of just the size and scale and the change that's happening in India. Normally people associate it with developing this and changing that, but all of a sudden it brought it to the mainstream of, boy, there's a man who has momentum and a real change agenda. I came through Singapore on the way here, and the Prime Minister was there eking out a number of strategic alliances or further developing strategic alliances with Singapore and pushing that message. India's open for real business. We're going to make it easier. And that was front page headlines in the newspaper. So I think at that level, that continual message is really reassuring to the investor community.
But have you seen them take their checkbooks out?
Well, I think people are absolutely looking at it. I think what's going to make the big change is that next step. When things like the REITs actually become formalised,
right,
where people have that opportunity to have liquidity around their investments. There's a big difference between actually buying the physical and actually being able to participate in the marketplace. And no question, I think that's where investors will look with much more surety in the future for India. Because there's no question, investors currently have choices around the globe, be it New York, London, Sydney and Tokyo. And so that's what we're competing against, and whether they buy the physical asset or they buy into is the choices and their risk profiles that they're prepared to accept.
So if we were to look at these risk profiles right now, are foreign investors looking largely at debt-based deals in India? Are they looking to get in on an equity side? What sort of IRR expectations or return expectations do they have from a possible investment opportunity in India?
Well, I think everybody continually goes back to the quality of the assets. Okay. What's happening in the macro of the market that they're looking at. So long as people are producing the quality of asset with the quality of occupiers, I think the rest sort of starts to build in with within their models. And then they look at, well, what's my weight to Asia? What's my weight to developing markets? What do my core funds look like? So, I don't think there's any one blanket piece of what's the IRR for India. I think it's much more around the opportunities that present themselves and what level of investor it is that is looking at it. Private equity groups, a Blackstone is prepared to look at India because they've got the experience, they've got the teams on the ground to be able to make those decisions and collect on those opportunities. GIC, Accenture. So there's groups that really understand the opportunity and will make the benefit of those.
So a lot of these opportunities happen through organizations like yours. And we do know, of course, that foreign investors have certain stringent requirements when it comes to due diligence and transparency, which is a problem that we used to have in India. Have we managed to make any headway in that area? Are there more builders or more developers within the industry now who sort of fit the requirements for transparency?
I actually think I think there's been huge movements since the early 2000s, and I think for a lot of that, I think India's been fixing itself on many of those measures. I think people took, I think there was advantage taken of the early investors coming into India, and for all of those reasons that you talk about, whether that was transparency. I think there's been a much greater appreciation that if you want all of these things from the globe, you have to behave and act and have systems, processes and regulations that will support them. And I think huge inroads have been made on there. I think the next stage is actually being able to connect the two. So I think there's many developers who are building quality product. And I looked at a number of those yesterday. I think there are developers who absolutely are focused on quality. I think there are developers who want the reputation of I execute, I deliver what I say I will, and that's changing the face of how people look at it. Because if we go back into the early 2000s, how many buildings did we walk through that were never quite finished?
Yes.
And then you walk into buildings today, or as I did yesterday, and these were global standard buildings.
Right. So let's also talk about ease of doing business. We know that the government has been saying a lot of things. A few things that have happened on the ground. The last we checked, this year's World Bank rating places India at 183 out of 189 on construction permits. You know, and the country is not in great company in that you know, at the bottom of that list. Obviously, a lot needs to be done. How much of the lack of ease of doing business sort of worries the global investor when they're looking at India?
Well, I think people, again, I think people are wary of that, and they're conscious of, in their overall assessment of what that looks like. But again, I think as people focus on building track records of, you know, I build quality, I build it on time, on budget, with full functionality, all of these things add to it. And you know, the first or the next step in that of people being able to look and consider is going to be then the liquidity piece. That if they do come in and they do invest, that then when they need to, they can choose at different times to get out and know that their money will move.
So in that case, the relaxed FDI rules that we had actually relaxed, the government relaxed over the last couple of weeks, does that make a massive difference when people are considering, because the exits have been sort of relaxed a little bit. You can exit whenever you want to. The minimum square foot of construction has come down. Does that make people more comfortable?
Well, I think it does. Most definitely. You know, again, I think you're going to have to now see a track record established where people say, look, I did this, I bought in here, I did these things, I sold out there, and you know, that was a very clean and clear process, and we were successful at it. And the more times that people can talk to that, the better off you know, you build a track record, and investors will come. But there's no question, those who are experienced at it, they understand that, and they will get rewarded for their years of where they've been able, just on the ground, getting the benefit of learning India and its intricacies over the last 10 years.
I know you personally have spent most of your career focusing on the commercial market.
Yep.
So when you consider the commercial markets available right now for investments across the Asia-Pac region, at least, where do India's markets of Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi stand right now?
I think more and more they become gateway cities. I mean, they're becoming more and more international. You know, whether it's the landscape that you look at as you drive in your car, whether it's you see the way people are approaching things. Look, I think they are genuine gateway cities, and the rise of the middle class, wealth creation that you're seeing, and just a general sophistication that is fantastic.
All right. Would you say also then, for Indian HNI investors looking to make investments, a lot of times we look overseas to maybe markets like Singapore. What are the alternative markets to India right now?
Well, I think what we're seeing is people invest across the globe, and normally it's where they understand. You know, I think again, Australia and New Zealand, I've seen Indian investors more and more look at those markets because their basis of analysis, you know, often it's replacement cost or land and buildings, and don't get stuck on the IRRs, so you can see where value creation is made. So I think that it really depends on where they want to connect with, and where the opportunities are. And high net worth individuals, they have a much greater capacity to make the decisions themselves. And so they can seize opportunities when they arise. Whereas, you know, more sophisticated funds who run the models, go through investment committees, and have to have that level of due diligence, often that opportunity is seized earlier by the high net worth private investors.
Right. We've had a situation in India where few of our largest builders owe about 30,000 crore rupees to various banks at this point, and a large portion of that debt is going to be defaulted upon this year. Do situations like that right now make foreign investors nervous?
I don't think many foreign investors would be aware to that extent. But again, across the landscape, somebody will see that as opportunity. You know, and I think it's just a question of those who stay close to their you know, core values and core standards of, you know, quality and execution. They will stand out from those who, you know, where there are issues.
So from your study of the market, and I know you spent some time talking to people, and you would have spent some time with your India team as well. Are there enough of those builders in the system to sort of, if you were to separate the ones that you're talking about, deliver quality, deliver on time, have the ratings, have the books to meet the requirements, and then separate it from everything else? Do we have enough on this side?
Well, I think that what you'll find is those bigger groups will continue to expand and seize that opportunity.
So then, are you saying we might also lead to some sort of consolidation in this market going forward?
Well, one would see that the groups that are successful will always look to expand on opportunity, and those that are challenged will look for lifelines where they can find them.
You know, the other problem that India has struggled with is the problem of a regulator, or the lack of one, which we've had up till now. It's a massive market, as you've experienced. We don't have regulation right now. The government is considering regulation, or maybe over the next couple of months we might have one. In terms of best practices that we can learn from across the world, what are the markets that you found regulation worked most efficiently, and what can we learn from those markets?
I think without a doubt Singapore.
Okay.
You know, Singapore has a very clear and pragmatic approach, which is finding that, making sure that things are done to a standard, but at the same time making sure that business is incentivized to continue to invest and grow, which then drives economic prosperity and employment.
I think one of the big challenges we've had in India is that of permissions, where all builders tell us that it takes far too long, and they need far too many permits and permissions to get a construction done. And of course, there's the discretionary conversations that happen on every level of that permission. Self-regulation obviously is something the government is not considering at this point. Tell us how Singapore does it.
Well, I mean, Singapore makes those conversations transparent at every level. You know, from the documentation phase right through to completion phase, that they're there, but they're there to make sure that there is a successful outcome. You know, they're very clear. If they make a decision that a project is green lighted, they make sure it's delivered on time, on budget, and that and they celebrate that in so many instances. You know, I think they're the model very much for whether it's developing nations, but I'd even say for the most developed nations to refresh where regulation has become so burdensome that they can get on top of that. Because you would argue in many markets that the steps that people go through it just drains the economic value of the project that's at hand.
You know, but then again, Singapore is a geographically tiny space. India, by comparison, then is massive. Do you think that even if we learn from those processes, we'd be able to sort of implement them in a market as vast as this one?
Well, I think the principles are sound, right? So I think if to the extent that you can execute against them, but the principles are sound. So I don't think that anybody would argue that if regulation assists and supports economic benefit and economic growth, they're absolutely mutually aligned, those two issues. So I think that then brings people together. And if it's a transparent process, I think it can be very successful no matter what the size is.
The other obviously massive market in India is the residential market. And there's been a lot of analysts who said, yes, the government is bringing down or relaxing the rules for FDI, but until you bring the customer back into the market, which is something we've had trouble with up till now, we're not going to see this market really recover. Is that the larger view within Cushman and Wakefield as well, that somehow we have to, unless we bring the end user back into this market, we're not going to see this market recover?
Well, I think the end user is critical to any of any market, be it residential, commercial, or industrial. If you look at the residential market on a week-by-week, month-by-month basis, then you're going to see those movements. But Faye, I actually think if you take a 3-year view or a 5-year view and holistic view of the marketplace, I mean, India's transforming on the residential accommodation and people's, what their demands are, what their likes are, and the product that's being offered to them. So I think that if the further you are away from the day-to-day involvement in that residential market in India, I think it's developing very, very nicely.
There's a fair amount of pessimism about the fact that we have a massive overhang of unsold inventory. There's a huge portion of this market has been under construction for a while. We've not launched anything new in the last 1 year because it's been a tough market for the builders. How do you see this playing out over the next few years? Do you foresee that we will maybe 3-4 years down the line actually arrive at a point where we are at a shortage again? Or do you think that construction will actually keep up with demand going forward?
You know, I think that if you look across the marketplace, we have to distinguish between the investor, those who are buying a house, and those who are buying a home. You know, and if you're buying a home, you're going to work out what your family requirements or your personal requirements are, and it's somewhere where you want to be. A home, you're buying something that you're hoping will make money, and that criteria is a little less stringent than what you are for your home. And on a home, it doesn't matter whether the price goes up or down in the short term. You're going to be there, you know, for a number of years. Whereas the investor, those typically have either expectation for whether it's speed of a return or for some kind of capital growth in typically a shorter period of time. And developers will produce product for all three categories. And so I think those who are making a decision, those end users that you talk about, they are absolutely satisfying themselves in the marketplace. Those who are in the other two, I mean, that is going to change. But, you know, ultimately, anything that's left behind, you know, the flight to quality will be the first that's taken care of, and those that were, let's call it the marginal producer, or those that were looking to move quickly for people to make money, they'll be taken up. But everything has a price, you know, and I think that is what the market will need to determine over the next couple of years.
You know, when you're looking at the Indian market from far away, like you said, if you step back and you look at it right now, what seems more attractive or holds more promise at this point, the commercial market or the residential market?
Well, it depends how much money you've got.
Let's assume a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think in every market there's going to be opportunities. If I was looking at corporate headquarters with fantastic covenants, with good quality construction, I would buy something in Bangalore, no problems. But you know, you have to be comfortable with the environment. You need to know from the manager, from the building construction, all of those. I mean, I think of those, the Blackstone Embassy product. You know, that's world class, right? And you'd have a look at it. If I was from a commercial side of things, I mean, I think the quality of the commercial buildings, the ones recently finished, are terrific. You know, and the tenant boards look as good as they would anywhere across the globe. And on the residential front, if I saw something here that was of a standard, knowing the population movements and the wealth creation, I from afar, I would have no hesitation investing, so long as I know I could get my money out.
So there's the catch then. You know, on last count, a couple of reports have told us that India, from year to date, from the beginning of the year till now, has seen commitments of foreign investment in real estate of up to $2.2 billion. 31% of that has been foreign investment. Do you expect this number to increase over the next year or so?
Absolutely, because if you look at, you know, we all accept that the interest rates, well, first of all, money is cheap. And I don't see in the global landscape that interest rates, all indications are, it's for the next couple of years, it's going to be, it's going to maintain at a softer level than an aggressive growth in those. I think that's what people would generally say. On that basis, supply or stock for premium investments across the globe, I mean, there's been a lot of activity around those. So if you want to participate in the markets, you're going to have to start to look further afield. And so, you know, and that's where India, for all its good work over the last few years, I think we'll then see that opportunity. As people say, I can't find what I need in these markets, let me show you this. A Cushman and Wakefield can say, here is that portfolio in and across India, would you look at that? And then all of a sudden, that's where the opportunity is. And I see that as coming over the next 12 to 18 months.
So when you're looking at that portfolio and you're offering those different options, and we talked about the fact that Singapore right now, in your opinion, has one of the best regulated markets in terms of construction permits, in terms of just getting things done, best practices, let's call it. But investors sitting across the globe are considering all of these options. How important is it for India right now to sort of come up to speed with the rest of the world in terms of regulation, ease of doing business, construction permits, so we don't lose out on opportunities? Because if I'm comparing markets and I want my money to be as risk-free as possible and I want my exits to be worry-free as well, then I am competing with the likes of Singapore and New York and London and all of these other markets, in Sydney and Melbourne. What are those areas that India needs to really, really focus on for the next 2 years in order to catch up?
Well, firstly, I think India is absolutely aware of what best practice looks like. I'm sure from the government side and from developers, investors, everybody knows what that looks like. And I think every day, every week, the conversations are being had. It's just everybody's got to feel their way. Is that a commercial negotiation, that journey, or is it this is what it is and this is how we will fall? This is how we will all comply. Again, I'm fairly confident from everything I've seen that the progress is being made.
Okay. And
I think that the conversation is right. And when you have the Prime Minister talking about being open for business and the ease of doing business, he wouldn't make those claims unless you could back them up.
We've also seen a lot of attention, stay within our 4 or 5 big cities, whether it's the NCR, Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, maybe Hyderabad or Chennai. There is very little investor interest flowing into the tier 2 cities, so the next rung of cities. Is that because we haven't managed to make these cities attractive enough? Do you believe what the government is doing in terms of smart cities and sort of making, building ideas, building job creation around these cities would work? Is there a reason why we don't consider what's happening outside of the 4 major cities?
Well, I think that's the same in any market. If you're thinking of North America, when people are talking about Indianapolis or Tennessee, or there's so many markets there. People focus on New York, Chicago, Washington, San Francisco, LA. They think of it in those ways, but does that mean that there are not good opportunities in those other markets? Again, if I was a private investor, I probably, based here in Mumbai, I would have my properties in the core markets, but I think I would be more than comfortable investing in a number of the second tier markets. But you just got to know what you're investing in and what your criteria for that is.
Going forward, obviously, there's going to be a fair amount of push for environment-friendly construction. Yep. There are some builders in our market that are already doing that. But what I want to understand from you, and this is, you're just going to have to predict the future at this point. Do you believe that these buildings that are 100% green or environment-friendly in the manner in which they're constructed and managed are the ones that are going to be most important going forward? This is a criteria that's going to become increasingly more important, even in a market like India, going forward. So if I'm today considering a home or an office or any other type of construction, I should keep in mind that it be environment friendly?
Well, Faye, it's not whether you keep it in mind. If you want to differentiate yourself, if you want the premiums, you absolutely have to do it. I mean, there is no question sustainability in buildings, be it residential, commercial and industrial, is an absolute requirement. At a practical level, if you think of our kids, their approach to the environment is just so different to my generation. I'm learning every day from them at a practical level. If it comes down to, I grew up in the days where I could turn the sink on to brush my teeth. I could leave the tap on for the whole time I was brushing my teeth. If ever my daughter walks in and I've got that happening, she'll turn the tap off and say, you only need... The awareness that people have is second to none. And then at a corporate level, I mean, boards across the globe are making very clear commitments of targets that they will meet as a corporation. And many of them have made those commitments a couple of years ago. and now getting to the point where they have to show the scorecard of where they're at. And things like buildings are critical to it. And so those buildings that have that, that credibility and specification, the premium that people will pay for that is there because it satisfies so many requirements that they have. Yeah, I just don't think it's a choice. And those that don't do it, their buildings will be chasing tenants a lot harder than those that do comply.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but thank you so much for spending time with us, Stuart. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
Appreciate that.